The Galactic Empire was a vast and unchallenged force, stretching its reach across thousands of worlds. It prided itself on absolute control, subjugating lesser species with an iron grip. Humanity had been a recent addition, absorbed into the Empire's dominion after years of careful diplomacy. Earth's leaders had hoped for peaceful coexistence, believing negotiation could secure their future among the stars. But the Empire did not view humanity as equals. They were tolerated, monitored, and when convenient, sacrificed. New Haven was one of Earth's most prosperous colonies, a beacon of human perseverance and ingenuity. Located on the Empire's outer rim, it was a thriving settlement of 5 million souls, most of them farmers, researchers, and families who had sought a fresh start among the stars. Children played in the streets of its capital, Arcadia, beneath twin suns that bathed the city in golden light. Parents sent them to schools that had been built with hope, believing they were raising the first generation of interstellar pioneers. Ambassador Alexander Carter had always feared this day would come. He had spent years negotiating with the Empire, enduring their arrogance and veiled threats. He had argued for humanity's sovereignty, for their right to exist without being ground beneath the weight of imperial law. Yet diplomacy had its limits. When the Empire accused New Haven of harboring rebels, Carter had pleaded for time, for proof, for any sliver of reason that might prevent the inevitable. The Empire had not listened. The attack came without warning. Orbital bombardment rained from the sky, fire and plasma tearing through the city's skyline. Buildings crumbled, reduced to molten slag as the Empire's warships executed their punishment. Communications were severed in an instant. Parents clutched their children as shelters collapsed, their screams lost in the cacophony of destruction. Those who tried to flee were met with precision strikes, transport vessels obliterated before they could even lift off. The Empire had not come to conquer. It had come to erase. In a matter of hours, New Haven was no more. The worst of it lay in what the Empire did next. Survivors were dragged from the wreckage, bound in chains and loaded onto transport ships. Families were torn apart, children ripped from the arms of their mothers as Imperial officers cataloged them like livestock. They would be sold, scattered across the galaxy as slaves, their names and identities erased. But not all were taken. Some were left behind, a message carved in blood and fire. The execution sites were broadcast across human space. Rows of children lined up along a scorched field, their hands bound behind their backs. Imperial soldiers clad in black armor stood behind them, rifles raised. The transmission was clear, the words of the executioner unyielding. "This is the price of rebellion." Then the gunfire began. The footage cut out, but it was too late. The message had already spread. Across human colonies, on Earth itself, billions watched in stunned silence as the reality of the massacre set in. The screams of children echoed in their minds. The sight of lifeless bodies burned into their memories. The Galactic Empire had miscalculated. It believed humanity to be weak, to be cowards hiding behind empty words and fragile treaties. It had failed to understand that, above all else, humanity remembered, and humanity would not forget. The Chamber of the Galactic Council was a monument to power, a vast hall where the rulers of empires, federations, and dominions gathered to shape the course of the universe. Towering pillars of obsidian and gold framed the central floor, where emissaries debated the fate of entire species beneath the cold, impassive gaze of history. Today, the air was thick with something more than politics. A silent weight pressed upon the assembled dignitaries, a tension that even the most jaded among them could not ignore. At the heart of the chamber stood Ambassador Alexander Carter. His uniform was pristine, but there was a hollowness to his gaze, a quiet fury simmering beneath the controlled mask of diplomacy. He had stood in this hall many times before, arguing for humanity's place among the stars. He had spoken with patience, with reason. None of that remained now. The footage had been transmitted to every member of the council. It had played on massive screens, the images of burning cities and lifeless children displayed for all to see. Some had turned away. Others had watched in silence. But none had spoken against it. Carter's voice cut through the stillness, measured and cold. "You call this order. You call this justice." He took a slow step forward, eyes scanning the assembled representatives. A world of innocent civilians, obliterated without warning. Infants executed in the streets. Families torn apart and condemned to slavery. And you stand here, in your seats of power, pretending this is acceptable. The representative of the Galactic Empire, Lord Inverus, leaned back in his throne-like seat, amusement flickering in his reptilian eyes. "Ambassador, your people were warned. The laws of the Empire are absolute. New Haven harbored insurgents, and the consequences were—" Carter's fist slammed onto the speaker's podium, the sharp crack reverberating through the hall. "Do not lie to me," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had lost any reason to hold back. "Do not insult me with manufactured justifications. The massacre of children is not law. It is not consequence. It is extermination." A murmur rippled through the council. Some shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke in his defense. The truth was plain for all to see, yet silence reigned. The Empire was powerful. To challenge, it meant war. Carter straightened, exhaling slowly. He had come here knowing the outcome, but diplomacy demanded he give them this one final chance. "Humanity does not beg," he said. "We do not kneel. But I stand here before you now, offering you the opportunity to do what is right. Surrender the ones responsible. Face justice. Acknowledge that this was an atrocity, and we will pursue no further conflict." Lord Inverus let out a slow, hissing chuckle. "You misunderstand your place, Carter. Humanity is tolerated in this council, nothing more. You are not our equals. You are a species granted the privilege of existing within our domain. You do not dictate terms to us." Carter did not flinch. His expression did not change. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. "Then you leave us no choice." He turned, walking away from the podium. Some of the representatives watched him with curiosity. Others, with something closer to apprehension. At the chamber doors, he paused, looking back over his shoulder. "We gave you a chance," he said quietly. "You will not receive another." Then he was gone. Hours later, deep within the heart of Earth's military command, Carter stood before a council of his own. Gone was the careful mask of diplomacy. Here, there was no need for pretense. Generals, admirals, and strategists waited in silence as he placed his hands on the war table before him. "The Empire believes we will cower," he said. "They believe we are weak. They believe we will do nothing." His eyes swept across the room, locking onto each and every person seated before him. "They are wrong." A holographic display flickered to life above the table, revealing a network of human warships hidden across the vastness of space. The Empire had monitored Earth's fleets, but what it had seen was only a fraction of what lay in the shadows. Warships equipped with advanced technology, stealth systems that had kept them hidden for years, cyber warfare units prepared to dismantle the Empire's communications within hours. Plans that had been in place since the moment humanity realized that peace was nothing more than a fragile illusion. Carter straightened, his voice unyielding. "Activate the war protocols. Deploy the fleets. Target their strongholds, their supply lines. Cut them apart piece by piece." He leaned forward, his next words cold as steel. "We are not here to negotiate anymore. We are not here to send messages. We are here to make them afraid." The orders were given. Across human space, engines roared to life, warships emerging from hidden stations, slipping into the darkness between the stars. In the vastness of the void, a storm was rising, one that would not cease until the Empire was brought to its knees. The war had begun. The first strike came before the Empire even realized war had begun. Entire battalions of their forces went silent overnight, their communications severed, their command structures reduced to chaos. Fleets stationed at the fringes of Imperial space found themselves adrift, unable to call for reinforcements as coordinated human forces descended upon them with precision that defied expectation. What the Empire had believed to be a species of diplomats and traitors had revealed itself to be something far deadlier. Humanity had not spent its time in the stars merely surviving. It had been preparing. At the helm of the battleship Indomitable, Admiral Elias Rains watched the battle unfold across the holographic display before him. Enemy formations crumbled in real time, ships blinking out of existence as orbital strikes and cyber warfare tore through their ranks. The Imperial fleet was vast, larger than anything humanity had ever faced, but it was complacent, an empire that had known only victory, unaccustomed to a foe that fought with precision rather than brute force. Phase 1 is complete, an officer reported, her voice calm despite the carnage on the screen. All primary communication hubs in the core worlds have been neutralized. The Empire is blind. Rains gave a slow nod. Good. Proceed to Phase 2. No hesitation. Across the galaxy, humanity struck. Tactical strikes crippled shipyards, munitions depots, and planetary defenses, turning the Empire's own infrastructure against itself. Rebellions ignited on occupied worlds, bolstered by human support. The oppressed species of the Empire, long beaten into submission, now saw their moment and took it. What had begun as a war for retribution had become something larger. The fall of an empire. On the imperial homeworld of Ortanes Prime, Lord Inverus stood in the Emperor's grand war chamber, watching the reports come in. His arrogance had drained from him in the days since the first attack. Entire fleets lost. Communications reduced to ghost signals. Insurrections erupting on planets once considered the backbone of imperial stability. Humanity had done in weeks what no enemy had managed in centuries. This is impossible, one of the Emperor's advisors stammered. They were nothing. They were weak. The Emperor sat upon his throne in silence, his claws digging into the armrests. His once imperious gaze was now clouded with something unfamiliar, fear. He had underestimated them. They all had. And now the storm had reached their gates. In the depths of space, the final battle loomed. The last remnants of the Imperial fleet had been recalled, forming a desperate line of defense around Ortanes Prime. They had lost the war before this moment, but pride demanded they make a final stand. The Emperor himself had declared it. No surrender, no negotiations. If the Empire was to fall, it would do so in fire. Indomitable led the charge. Human warships moved with deadly coordination, their formations shifting in ways that defied the Empire's rigid tactics. Energy blasts tore through shields. Missile salvos found their marks with ruthless precision. The battle was over before it had truly begun. The Empire had always fought its wars with the assumption of superiority, never preparing for an enemy that could outthink, outmaneuver, and overwhelm them at every turn. A breach team landed within the Imperial Palace, cutting through the last of the defenders. Carter walked through the shattered remains of the throne room, the stench of burning metal and ozone heavy in the air. The Emperor, once a towering figure of authority, now lay at the foot of his own throne, coughing up blood, his ornate robes torn and scorched. Carter regarded him with the cold detachment of a man who had long since run out of mercy. You could have stopped this. The Emperor's lips curled in a weak snarl. We are the Empire, he rasped. We were destined to rule. Carter crouched beside him, meeting his fading gaze. You massacred our children, he said quietly. Now there will be no one left to remember yours. The Emperor exhaled one last shuddering breath, and then he was gone. Across the galaxy, the remnants of the Empire fell one by one. Some surrendered, hoping for leniency. Others fought to the last, unwilling to accept the new reality. But it no longer mattered. The war was over. Humanity had done what none before them had dared. As Carter stood in the ruins of what had once been the center of Imperial power, he looked up at the night sky. The stars stretched endlessly above, no longer symbols of conquest, but of something new. A future forged not in submission, but in defiance. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to breathe.